So on a slightly separate note, nididhyasana is translated as meditation. That's this kind of literal meaning. Meditation on the self means self-inquiry. If ever you see meditation on the self, it means self-inquiry. It means taking the attention and putting it on the self. It doesn't mean you're thinking of the self a lot. In the scriptures, they say Atma Vichara means self-inquiry. Atma Dhyana means meditation on the self. Dhyan means concentration. What, what does it mean? What is concentration? Concentration is when you direct your attention onto something, isn't it? That's what concentration means. And if I'm concentrating on something, I'm directing my attention to that point. So that's what dhyana is. Dhyana. The word dhyan in China, in Buddhism, that word became translated as Chan. And that same word Chan in China became in Japan Zen. The word Zen means dhyan, means meditation. They call it Zen meditation, which means meditation, meditation. You know, it means Atma Dhyan, self-inquiry. This is why Bhagavan in Who Am I writes, as meditation on the self grows higher and higher, the thoughts will cease. Earlier in the text, he explains how all appearances, tables, chairs, thoughts, feelings, bodies, minds, worlds, universes, these are all thoughts. He explains this in his other writings as well, some of the hymns to Arunachala. In the Eights Stanzas to Arunachala, he explains how all this universe is a creation of the mind. Let me see if I can find it. So when he says the thoughts cease, he means the entire world of objects, the entire manifestation will cease. It's a bit, the language is a bit technical. He's talking about the self, and then he says, from the self proceeds the phantom of the mind, emitting its latent. Sorry, this is eight stanzas to Arunachala. This is one of the few works we have of Bhagavan's that he wrote spontaneously. It's in the collected works. Almost everything Bhagavan wrote was in response to a devotee asking him a question or asking him to write something. There are a few things that he wrote spontaneously. And this is one of the few works he wrote spontaneously. So it's a beautiful love poem to Arunachala and a beautiful exposition of the entire teaching, explained with reference to his guru, Arunachala. And this is verse 6. I'm just sort of missing the first couple of lines. From it proceeds the phantom of the mind, emitting its latent, subtle, dark mists, which, illuminated by thy light of consciousness, reflected on them, appear within as thoughts, whirling in the vortices of Prarabdha, means destiny or fate, later developing into the psychic worlds and projected outwardly as the material world, transformed into concrete objects, which are magnified by the outgoing senses and move about like pictures in a cinema show. In that one sentence, Bhagavan has just described the act of creation. How marvelous. He said, there's the self, and then there's this power in the self, the mind, that doesn't actually emerge, but seems to emerge. And it projects these latent, subtle, dark mists. You can imagine these dark vapors, dark mists, which then condense into thoughts. condensation is when something very subtle becomes more gross. Like when water vapor condenses into water, you got something more subtle becoming something more gross. He said the subtle dark mists appear within as thoughts, whirling in the vortices of prarabdha, meaning karmic, under cause and effect of karma. And this is developing into the psychic worlds. Psychic, what does psychic mean? Psychic literally means to do with the psyche. Psyche is the Greek word for mind. Psyche is the Greek word for the mind. That's why it's called psychology. Ology means science. Psyche means mind. Psychology is the science of the mind, understanding of the mind. So the thoughts, first are these dark mists, these vapors. This is actually the causal body he's talking about. And then it goes into the dark mists of thoughts, which then form the mind. And then he's saying, and then projected outwardly as the material world, transformed into concrete objects. So he's saying how the thought, which is like a mist, that condenses into the mind, which then condenses further into concrete objects in the world, projected outwards more. This is verse 6 where he explains this. He's defining his one way of describing how the world is created. Later, through realization, we come to see that never occurred. But out of compassion, he's given us these teachings.